We are down to just a couple of seats left in the Negotiation Made Simple live workshop right here in Nashville, Tennessee on May 5th and 6th, 2026. I hope that you'll consider coming and being a part of those and jump on one of those final seats remaining. We will have people literally from around the country who are all committed to becoming better in terms of how they put deals together and how they solve problems. What I'll do in this workshop is I won't give you 12 tricks or anything like that. What I do is I unpack the process that you use every day to advance your business, whether it means getting deals done or whether it means solving problems. And in unpacking these dynamics, you will learn a whole new language for how it is that you can negotiate. I'll give you a framework in which you can place every single one of your negotiations so strategically you know exactly what you need to do and you know the decisions that are critically important for you to make in order to get the deal that you're looking for. We'll also spend a lot of time talking about some psychological dynamics, talking about how it is that we influence and how we persuade people. And at the end of the workshop, I will give you a tool so that you now will have an organized way to prepare for every single negotiation. And in this tool on one page, you will be able to work through this entire framework. You'll be able to take that page with you and go negotiate successfully to win business, to lead people, and to accomplish what you want to accomplish, both in business and in life. I hope you'll come and join us. Go to LowryGroup.net to learn more. Welcome to Negotiation Made Simple, where we help you master the art of negotiation and win the next deal. In this episode, I'm eager to answer some questions that have been brought to me by founders and small business owners. These are questions about how to put deals together, how to overcome barriers in putting deals together, how to solve problems that are inherent in business. If you're not a founder or small business owner, don't go anywhere because this episode will have something for you as well. Because many of these questions, they apply to any of us that are working with people or leading businesses. And what I want to do is provide some very practical advice to offer some insights that I hope will be helpful in some of the biggest challenges and how it is that we can grow businesses and how it is that we can work with people in order to get the deals done that will help us be successful. Let's jump in and answer these questions and have some conversation around how we use negotiation to advance our startup and small businesses. But I've been thinking about founders and small business owners and some of the unique challenges that they have with respect to their negotiations. And like so many of us, when you think about getting prepared to run a small business or to start a company, the skill of negotiation isn't one that you quickly identify as something that will be critical to your success. But the reality is that if you look at the definition of negotiation, at least how I define it, and that is a strategic communication process to get a deal or to solve a problem. And you think about being a founder or being a small business owner, that's your day. That's where you spend so much of your time is putting deals together to grow your business and then dealing with the problems that come, whether they be problems with people or problems with your product or problems in terms of your customers and things like that. Those problems tend to escalate up to you. And as the owner or as the founder, you're the one with the responsibility of figuring out how to get those resolved. So what I want to do today is I want to just answer some questions. I've had the opportunity recently to speak with some entrepreneurial groups, with some small business owners, and in those, there were lots of Q&A, lots of questions, and that's really what gave me the idea for this episode was really those good questions that were asked that I wanted to address on a broader basis right here. And so let's start first in thinking about deals and how it is that we put deals together. And from the perspective of a founder or a small business owner, what are the challenges in terms of making those deals happen? And we know those deals are important because those deals are going to grow the business. Those deals are going to put together partnerships that are going to be critical for the business. Those deals means more revenue. Sometimes those deals mean that there is an employee that comes on board. The deals are critical. And so we've got to be skilled in how we put them together and how we overcome the barriers to those deals happening. So I'm not going to take these in any particular order, but here are 6 or 7 questions around deal making that founders and small business owners have asked that I want to address today. The first one is this. The first one is, how do I know if I'm leaving money on the table? One of the things that's really important for founders and small business owners is to maximize the value of your product or service. That's going to ultimately maximize the value of your business, which will be important if one day you want to sell or if you want to go get another round of investment or whatever the case might be. And so lots of people become concerned about how is it that they know if they left money on the table. And I understand it because I've got a small business myself. I've founded several businesses. I know that when you're trying to get things going and you're scrambling and you're hustling and you're doing everything you can, it's really easy to just give discounts in order to get the deal because the deals become so important. But when we start doing that, here's where the fear creeps in of whether or not we're leaving money on the table. And so I think what I'd say in response to this, to people that are concerned about this, is to recognize that in negotiation, you will never get what you don't ask for. It's just very rare that someone's going to give you a bunch of value or pay you more money for your product or your service than what you ask for. And so as you think about that fundamental principle that you will not get what you don't ask for, I think that answers this question right here to where we have to be bold in what we ask in exchange for our product or our service. We got to make sure that we don't undervalue it. We need to fairly value it. You can't go too far with this, but we need to be bold and we need to be confident in terms of what we ask in exchange for whatever it is that our company does for customers. And that's how we know that we're not leaving money on the table. We want to get to a place where perhaps we leave ourselves a little bit of room. So if there's pushback, if there's competition that's stepping in that may undercut us a little bit, we have a little bit of room to move. Sometimes we need to do that in order to get the deal. Sometimes we don't. But if we're never being challenged, if we're never facing objections in terms of the numbers that we're putting on the table and what we're asking for, chances are we probably are leaving a little money on the table. And so the key is to be ambitious as we can when we give a quote or when we give pricing or whatever the case might be. And that's how we can be careful not to leave money on the table. Now, here's another interesting question when it comes to this part of kind of the deal making, and that is thinking about procurement. Now, some have asked, what do I do with these procurement teams and these procurement people that I feel are just always trying to squeeze me? I get a deal put together with the person that we're going to be doing business with, or we're going to be working on the project with, or we're going to be fulfilling the order with. And then all of a sudden I get sent over to procurement, and procurement all of a sudden wants a 15% discount, or they found some alternative that is less and they want me to match that alternative. And many times it's not apples to apples. And so what do I do when I'm in a situation to where now I've got a procurement person that is wanting to take another bite of the apple, but as they do so, they're taking a bite out of my profits? Well, this is something that you want to plan for, because this is something that's very common, especially doing business with larger organizations. Yes, you will have to deal with procurement, and yes, procurement's job is to make sure that these deals are very efficient. And what that means is that many times they will ask for additional discounts. I've literally just had this happen with one of my clients. And so it's really important that as you're doing the deal, that you understand the process that the other side is going to use in order to get the deal done. And if you ask that question about who you will need to work with, how this deal is going to get approved on the other side, who will be involved in that, if you hear that it will go to procurement or if it will go to purchasing or whatever the name of the department is, there's a moment where you need to start planning immediately. And you need to plan to be able to give another discount in order to get the deal, because that's what procurement is going to be looking for. Now, in some cases, you may have to push back. There may be a moment where you say, look, I've given you my best deal and I've done this, to where you tell procurement, I understand what you're trying to do, I'm with you, but I can assure you that I've already worked in those discounts. I've already given you the best deal that I can possibly give you. These are going to be the terms under which we need to do business. And though there are some moments where you just have to say no, especially if you haven't prepared for it, or if what they're asking for is just unreasonable. You have to be prepared to say no to that and understand that there's some risk with that. But I think it's more effective if we plan for it, if we leave ourselves a little bit of room to where we can give procurement a small win, but something that they can take back and say, okay, we were able to extract more value. I find that to be the best way to work through the procurement team and that process. The other thing that I try to be clear with them about is that if you do it on this particular occasion, then the expectation is that's how it's going to be going forward. And so it's really important to manage expectations and to let those procurement teams know, okay, we made a little adjustment here. This adjustment needs to apply to every one of our deals over the next couple of years. We're not going to be doing larger adjustments. Don't come asking us for more or additional adjustments, but to try to manage expectations with procurement so they don't become a barrier down the road as well. Here's one that I love. I love this question. So a founder asked, how do I negotiate with bigger players when I'm the smaller player and they know it? Well, this is the beauty of being a small business. This is the beauty of being a founder and leading a startup is, yes, you're small, you're hungry, you're scrappy. And oftentimes to grow your business, you're going to have to do business with organizations that are much larger, much more sophisticated, probably have many more people, many more systems, many more processes in terms of doing business. And so one of the things that I think is critical here is to help the larger organization understand how lean you are and how it is that you've passed along that efficiency to them so that they can feel confident that they're getting a really good deal. And to help them understand that there are benefits of being a big, large, mammoth organization, but there are also benefits to being a smaller, more nimble organization. And so you take what is a perceived weakness and you turn it into a strength. And so that strength becomes, as a smaller organization, you can be more responsive, you can be more nimble. You have the ability to have more control in terms of your timelines, your deadlines, in terms of your lead times, some of those kinds of things. You have more control of those because you have less to manage. And so the key is to recognize, yes, that you're smaller, but then begin to turn that into a strength and begin to help your customer or help your partner, whoever it is that you're negotiating with, understand how that is a value add, not just something that puts you in a weaker position. And so as a result of that, you can continue to have leverage in the negotiation. You can continue to ask for more to protect your position without having to just give in to what the bigger company wants, because there are the benefits of being smaller and being more nimble. And so I think that's the best way to kind of manage that power differential. The other thing is sometimes you really got to focus on the process because you won't necessarily have as much power, especially if you're the smaller organization and the other side knows it. And so knowing that, you really want to pay attention to the process that you use. It may be a more cooperative approach as a more competitive approach, because you don't have the power to win the competitive game if that's what it becomes. And so instead, it's developing a partnership as opposed to doing a more kind of cutthroat, win-lose kind of business deal. But know this, that being small and scrappy, it can be a strength, and we've got to leverage it as a strength. And if we do so, we can do a lot of really good business with a lot of companies that are substantially larger than ours. Okay, here's another one in terms of putting deals together. This one also may step into the problem-solving realm a little bit, but someone asked, so what's the best way to say no without damaging relationships? And so here's a moment where someone has proposed something. Maybe they've proposed some pricing to you, or they've proposed a partnership to you, and it's not going to work. It just doesn't fit. The numbers aren't right. The terms aren't right. And so it's not something that you are comfortable moving forward on, but you really value the relationship. You want to advance the relationship. And so what do you do in these moments where you need to say no, but you want to protect the relationship? So this goes back to what I've talked about before, where there is substance and there is process. There is a style, but then there's also the actual substance in terms of what needs to be part of this particular negotiation. And so the substance in this particular case is probably not going to be all that great. It's certainly not what the other side is looking for. You're in a position where you have to say no. And so this is where the style and the process become very, very important. I love this story. This is a story that my dad used to tell about a moment where he was doing some training with a Supreme Court in a country a long way away from the United States. And he had built this relationship. He had worked this relationship for years. And the Supreme Court of this country decided that they were going to go with another university for their training going forward. And this was a moment that was going to be kind of a significant moment because they had done so much work with Pepperdine, where my father was a professor. And now here's the moment where they are going to kind of move their business to a competitor. And it's not going to be something that my father wants to hear as the person who is leading this work on behalf of Pepperdine. And so what one of the administrators of the Supreme Court did was actually fly maybe halfway across the world to deliver this news. Didn't need to do that, could have sent an email, could have picked up the phone, could have jumped on a Zoom. But the relationship was so important to him in the dispute resolution community. And he wanted my father and Pepperdine to know how much they were appreciated for the work that they have done. And even though they weren't going to move forward with it, there was a tremendous amount of respect there that was demonstrated by the fact that this gentleman was willing to jump on a flight that cost thousands of dollars and took hours and hours of his time to go deliver this bad news personally. And as a result of that, the relationship stayed intact and it led to other opportunities down the road. And so in those moments where you have to say no, think about how it is that you say no. What is the most respectful way that you could do it? What is a way that you could do it that honors the other side, even though you're not going to deliver the news that they want? Maybe that means you jump on a plane and you go do it personally. Maybe it means that you say no to that, but you propose another form of partnership, or you present another idea that you can work together on, to where you immediately transfer that energy in that relationship into something else other than what was proposed. And so those two ideas right there, I think, can be really useful. And how it is that we say no, but still advance the relationship, it has to do with how the people feel and how we make them feel and the respect that we show to them. And so in your context, you'll have to figure out how to do that. But if you do that, then people will understand, okay, the terms weren't right, or this just didn't make business sense for them to move forward. And yet, by them doing it this way, this is still someone that I want to be a partner with. This is still someone that I want to do business with. This is an organization that I want to be associated with. And those are the kind of things that you want to protect. Those are the bridges that you want to keep intact, because many times those relationships will lead to new opportunities. And because you did it in a strategic way, now you're in a position to advance that relationship with the next opportunity. All right, here's one that often happens kind of in the sales context. So someone asked the question they said, what do I do when I'm pursuing a prospect? We're having great conversations. I think this thing is headed in the right direction. We're about to get a deal. And all of a sudden, the prospect goes cold, goes silent. They've shown a lot of interest, but now I can't even get them to respond to an email or respond to a phone call. What do I do? There's lots of reasons that this happens. Sometimes it's because they're just not interested. And yes, they may have expressed some interest early, but for whatever reason, that interest has faded. Other times, it's not because they're not interested, it's because they're not ready. And what I mean by that is sometimes they got to work through procurement, or sometimes they got to wait for the approval of an executive, or sometimes they've got to finish their diligence and they've got to talk to a couple of other firms before they move forward with you. But they just don't know what to say and they can't appropriately reveal what's going on. And so the best thing they can do is just simply go silent. And so the best thing to do here is, instead of just trying to convince them to do the deal, that's usually what we try to do. Let's get our next meeting scheduled. Let's talk about next steps. If you sign by such and such a date, those are the kind of things that so many people try to use to close. But sometimes it makes sense just to back up and ask some questions. And so instead of pushing, here's the moment where you can just acknowledge what's going on and recognize with them through an email or maybe through a voicemail or something to say, hey, I understand that this may not be the right time for you. I really don't want to pester you about this, but I'd love to understand a bit of what's going on. Can you just give me some sense of, do I need to be more patient? Is there something that wasn't right? Begin just asking some questions and seeing if you can get them to respond to some of those questions. And so instead of taking a position and pushing further, just hold the deal very loosely. And instead, be very inquisitive and very understanding. I understand that you may need to take some more time. Happy to give you more time, but I'd love to have a sense of what you think that will be and get a sense in terms of what I need to be thinking about during this interim time period in order to be in the best position to meet your needs and be ready to move forward on this. And oftentimes what I've found when I've done that is sometimes it's very short and very brief, but I will get some sense of, hey, listen, we just went through the budget process and this isn't going to be in the budget this year, but it's going to be in the budget next year. Let's talk again in a few months. And there, the deal isn't dead, it's delayed. But I know that now, and now I know what the challenge is. And so now I can figure out how to position things to where it's in the budget for next year, and we can get ahead of that process to make sure that that happens. And so asking those questions and not being pushy, but just holding the deal loosely and wanting to be helpful in terms of whatever the challenge is, I find that can go a long way in terms of ending that silence or reheating that particular opportunity that has gone cold. Okay, a couple of more here on the deal side, and then I want to spend some time thinking about problems, okay? This one I'm going to kind of combine together because it really kind of goes together. So someone asked, if I'm strapped for cash, should I take a bad deal just to grab the cash? And then there was another question about when to know when to walk away from a deal. So I'm going to kind of combine these together. Cash is a reality of business, right? And if you're a startup or sometimes when you're a small business, cash becomes king because cash becomes critical as far as making payroll, paying the bills, being able to purchase inventory. Cash just is absolutely important. And so, yes, there are times where you probably are going to do a deal and do it under less favorable terms because you need the revenue, you need the cash in order to move the business forward. So it's not really for me to say, should you ever take a bad deal if you need the cash? That's a business decision that you have to make. However, if you decide to do that, what I would tell you to do is to find a reason that you communicate to the other side as to why you're doing the deal under those terms. Again, it's all about managing expectations. If you don't manage those expectations, then as you do those deals going forward, there's going to be the expectation that the terms of that deal are going to be the terms of every deal. And so instead of doing one bad deal, you might find yourself in a position to where you're doing multiple bad deals because of that cash crunch, that particular month or that particular quarter. And so it's also probably not a great idea to go and say, hey, we're strapped for cash, so we're going to do this deal. Instead, find something else. Find another thing that you can kind of latch on to say, here's the reason why we're going to do this deal under special terms. And this is not something that we can guarantee going forward. There should be no expectation that we'll do it under these terms going forward. But for this reason, we're going to make this offer to you right now with the hopes that we can get this deal closed and kind of move forward. And so whether you have to do that or not, I don't know. But if you do, be sure to find that other thing that you can point to so that deal doesn't set bad precedent for you. And then when you think about walking away from a deal, kind of the opposite question. And really walking away from the deal and how to make that decision really has to do with alternatives. It also has to do with who you are and who you want to be. So one of the things that I love to say, and I heard this from a businessman from Dallas years ago, and I've always held this lesson kind of in my heart, and that is, you can't do good business with bad people. And there will be deals in your life that financially might be really, really good deals. But if you just don't have a good feeling about the person on the other side or the people that are part of that partnership, or you're not impressed in terms of their character or their ethics or anything like that, if there's any red flags that go up, then that may be a moment where you should walk away from the deal, even though financially it would be a really, really good deal. In other cases where you're really having to make a decision in terms of the substance of the deal, that's where alternatives become really, really important. And that's why it's so critical to have alternatives, is because if you have a better alternative, then it makes walking away from the deal really, really easy. If you don't have another alternative, that's where we get ourselves in trouble, to where we do deals that we probably should have walked away from. And so whatever deal you're looking at, it's really, really important to think about the alternatives and to have alternatives. And so yesterday I was having lunch with someone in the entertainment business, and they were talking about talent, and they were talking about procuring some talent for a project that they're working on, a documentary project. And they were thinking about who. And we were throwing out some names of different celebrities and actors that could be part of this project. And the nice thing was there was about 5 or 6 people identified that could work. It wasn't just one person. And so because of that, that creates a lot more leverage in terms of the negotiation. And the first person that was approached on this deal loved the project, but this person brought 20 people to the table. And those 20 people all wanted kind of a bite of it. They all wanted a piece of it, and they all wanted to have their say. And my friend that I was meeting with was just like, this is going to be so hard. If every decision I've got to work with 20 people, that may not be the way we want to go. And so because there were alternatives, it made that really easy in terms of walking away from that entertainer, knowing that there was alternatives and there were other options available. So some great questions there in terms of deals and putting deals together. Let's go to a couple of questions in terms of thinking about problems that arise when doing business. So one founder, or maybe this was a small business owner, I think it was, they asked this question. They said, my COO just gave me an ultimatum. He said that either he's going to leave or another one of our colleagues on the leadership team needs to leave. Now, that's not a very fair thing for a COO to do. But in this particular circumstance, it sounds like that's what he did, was he went ahead and he gave this ultimatum. And so here the CEO is asking the question, how should I handle this situation? Now, this is a challenging situation to handle because the COO may be right. Maybe that other person is a problem. And it's a problem that you as the CEO haven't seen or haven't dealt with. And it's now risen to the level that you've got folks that are threatening to leave because of this one person, this one bad apple on the team. The challenge is the COO is not behaving well either. And so you've got to be very careful in this moment that you don't reward the bad behavior. The COO, hopefully, from a leadership standpoint, knows better than to give this ultimatum. But it sounds like he's just so frustrated that he's at his breaking point and he's probably not making the best decisions. And now he's wanting to force the CEO's hand in terms of what to do about this particular situation. And so I think in this dynamic where you have this kind of ultimatum kind of thing, one of the things that you've got to do, actually it's two things, is you want to get control of the communication and you want to get control of the process. Notice that the COO has put you in a no-win situation. Whatever decision you make based upon the ultimatum that he has given you, you're probably going to find yourself in a difficult spot. And so here's the moment where you want to get out of that dynamic. And by taking control of the communication and taking back control of the process from the COO, you can begin to work the problem. And so in that particular case, in terms of taking the power away from the COO, I think the moment there is to go to the COO and say, hey, listen, I take it from the fact that you've given this ultimatum that there's a problem and maybe I haven't seen it or I haven't addressed it, but you have my word that I will, and that I'm willing to kind of take a look at this and dig into this and figure out what's going on here. And then to the COO to just recognize, listen, I understand if you have to leave, you have to leave. And if that's something you need to do, great. If it's something to where you want to stay, but you want to stay under a dynamic that is very different, I'm happy to work with you in terms of what that looks like. And so by doing that and kind of releasing the COO to leave if necessary, but inviting him to be part of the solution, you take some of the bite out of the ultimatum. Maybe the COO decides to go, but usually in those moments, they're just using it as a threat. They really want to stay if possible. And so in those moments, you'll get some nod, you'll get some agreement in terms of being willing to be part of the solution. Now you've worked yourself kind of through the ultimatum. Now you got to go to work on the problem. And the problem is whatever relationship dynamic is going on between the COO and whoever this other person is. And that's where the communication and the process becomes really, really important. You'll want to spend time with both of them. You'll want to get both sides of the story. And then you'll want to craft a process that perhaps makes whatever changes are necessary, or a process that begins the reconciliation between those two folks so that you can get back to having a healthy and functional leadership team. So anytime you're dealt with in terms of an ultimatum, you want to diffuse the ultimatum, take control of communication, take control of the process, and begin to work the problem that led to that. And I think that's how you can work through it. Okay, next question has to do with bullies. And so this person asked, I've got a lot of bullies in my life right now. Some of them are customers, some of them are employees. What do I do with the bullies in my life? Well, all of us run into bullies everywhere, and I think you could argue that that's happened for many of us since elementary school or middle school when we had to deal with bullies on the playground. Bullies are just going to be part of life. And bullies, these are folks that for whatever reason, they've discovered that they will get more in life if they use these kind of bullying, intimidation tactics. And so for some people, it hasn't stopped. They started using them when they were very young, and as they moved into adulthood and in their professional lives, they continue to use them, and they can be very difficult to deal with. But if you remember, the advice from when you were a child and someone who would pull you aside and say, hey, listen, look, here's the deal. You're going to have to stand up to the bully. And that doesn't mean that you necessarily punch them back. Maybe it does, I don't know, but you've got to stand up to the bully, because if you just continue to give in and give in and give in, then you're just going to incentivize the bully to continue to use that behavior and those tactics. And the same is true in the professional world, to where there are moments where you just have to stand up to people, and you can't worry about them liking you. You've got to be willing to take them on. And you don't do it from the standpoint of being competitive or combative with them. You do it from the standpoint of protecting the people around you. And by standing up to the bully, by being the one that's willing to take them on, that is actually a tremendous gift that you are giving to the people around you who are also suffering and having a difficult experience because of that bully. And so I spend a lot of my time in litigation and dealing with people in litigation. And so I spend a lot of my time working with attorneys and opposing counsel. And many times those attorneys are bullies. That's how they want to pursue their case. That's how they choose to engage with the other side, is they use bullying tactics. And I actually had a call yesterday where a lady called and said, what do I do with this attorney? He's a bully. He treats me horribly. He treats my insureds horribly. What is it that I can do? This has been going on for far too long. And unfortunately, that behavior is actually working, because we're seeing results to where we don't like the fact that this attorney is being successful with just being absolutely horrible to us and everyone around him. And so it was one of those moments where I had to tell her, I said, look, this is going to be difficult. This is going to create tension. This is not going to make life easier in the short run, but it will in the long run. You've got to stand up to him. And so if you need to hire new attorneys that are willing to stand up to this guy, that are willing to take him on, go hire new attorneys that can do that, and have that be their charge, is to match his tactics, to match his bullying tactics. And that's the only way to incentivize him to change his behavior and perhaps becoming more cooperative. And so one of the things as the leader, though, or as the owner, is as you perceive that you have bullies on your team, you also need to think about how you want to deal with them. Because bullies can be very productive. Bullies oftentimes get what they want, and they can become very useful in that regard. But the challenge is they leave what I call a wake of destruction, where no one wants to work with them. And eventually that catches up. And so you've got to be very, very careful if you perceive that you've got a bully on your team, how you manage that bully that's not playing against you, but playing for you, but can end up creating some real problems for you by the way that they treat people and by the way that they do business. Okay, let me get to some real practical problems and address these. One is this person asked, I'm trying to hire a new person, but they are demanding a large amount of equity in the business because they say that the salary is way too low. I don't want to give the equity, but I'm not in a position to pay a larger salary. What do I do? Okay, so here we have different pools of value. One pool of value is the equity. One pool of value is the salary, but there's other pools of value as well. There's flexibility. there's vacation time, there's work expectations, there's productivity. There's lots of pools of value in terms of an employment relationship. And so here, the way that this problem is set up, it just assumes two pools of value, but there's actually many, many more. And so the key here is trying to link these different pools of value strategically. And so this person kind of made an attempt to do it that said, well, if you're not going to pay me what I think I'm worth from a salary standpoint, then I want a big ownership interest in the company. But probably because of your capital stack or because of what you have in mind in terms of investment in the company down the road, you don't want to give away a lot of equity because it's going to make that more difficult. And so that's not something you want to do. And so instead, go find some different pools of value. If you don't have any flexibility on the equity or the salary, do you have flexibility in terms of the time or the person's schedule or the flexibility that's offered to them in terms of how they work or work from home? Might there be something to where there could be not equity, but a profit sharing package down the road to where they can get a bit of the upside, but have it not be actual equity in the company? And so there's lots of creative things to do here, but what you've got to do is you've got to look at all of the different pools of value instead of just these two, and then think creatively about how you can give in some in order to get in the others. And that creates the opportunity for a creative deal to come together. All right, this one's kind of interesting. I have a customer that always pays late. How do I get them to pay faster? Great problem. You're doing work, you're delivering it, you're invoicing for it, but they're just not paying on a timely basis. Now, many times what people do is they don't handle this in a really smart way. And so here's the first thing to be careful of, is you don't want to have just this automated bureaucratic process to where if they go to 60 days late, they get this nasty letter. If it's 90 days, they get this nasty letter. And if it's 120 days, they go to collections or something like that. You want to be a bit more dynamic than that. In those particular situations, many times what happens is it will go to collections, and that will create angst in the relationship. And as a result of that, you don't know why it is that they're not paying. Maybe it's they don't have the money, or maybe it's something totally different. I actually represented a client in a lawsuit about this, to where the client didn't get paid, and the client allowed this to go to collections. And because of the way that the collections attorney managed the lawsuit to try to recover like $30,000, I think it was $33,000 is what was owed, that attorney blew up a $2 million a year relationship between his client and a large hospital system. Not good. Not very strategic. And so what I would do is, number one, I'd call somebody with the company that isn't paying and just simply ask some questions. Hey, listen, we're sending these invoices, they're net 30 days, and it just seems like month after month, the invoice is being paid late. Can you give me a sense of why, or is there anything that we can be doing differently on our side to try to facilitate the payment on time? Or is there a way to negotiate a period of time that would be more reasonable for you that we can depend on so that we can manage our cash accordingly and things like that? Having that telephone conversation many times will take care of the issue, because that person won't want to keep dealing with that over and over and over again. They'll fix internally whatever they need to fix to get you paid on time. Or you're going to learn that there's a problem that has to be dealt with, and that will open the conversation in terms of dealing with that problem. And so it may be that their turnaround time is just not fast enough. It may be that they're short-staffed in that department right now. You'll learn about whatever it is and then can think creatively about how it is to solve it. But the key is, this is a moment to pick up the phone and talk to someone who knows what's going on. And you may have to set a meeting or set a Zoom, but you'll want to get to a person to try to understand why this process is not happening the way that it needs to. Okay, here's one. How do I negotiate without being seen as difficult? Okay, so I'd go back to what I said earlier about style and substance. There is a way to negotiate to where you have a very agreeable style, but you're very disciplined in terms of the substance and the value that you exchange. And so many times people are seen as difficult because they're hard to communicate with. They make it very uncomfortable to communicate with them. They're very difficult to deal with. Everything is a challenge. Everything is a problem. And so as a result, people are just trying to get out of that dynamic as quickly as they can. Instead, you have the opportunity to be very easy to work with. In fact, I recommend that because those are the people that people gravitate toward in terms of doing business. But that doesn't mean that you have to give on the substance. It doesn't mean that you have to do deals that are not good for you. What you have to do is you have to be willing to work with the other side. You have to be willing to communicate, willing to listen. You've got to be respectful, be friendly, laugh a little bit, have a little fun with them. But you can do all of that without giving a bunch of value. And so there you can negotiate very, very aggressively, but do so in such a way that you're not necessarily seen as difficult or you're not seen as a problem. So it really comes down to this whole idea of you got the process, you got the people, and then you ultimately have the product. And basically what we're saying here is pay attention to the process, treat the people really well, and then you don't necessarily need to compromise in terms of the product. There you can hold strong, but you can still kind of create satisfaction in the other side by how it is that you go about and do business. All right, let's do one more. This is one that I run into often, and this becomes a major reason why I get brought in to do training with salespeople. And so here was a small business owner that's got a sales team. And their question was, my sales team keeps getting undercut by the competition. This has caused them to just give the discounts up front, very early in the process, just to throw all the discounts that they can in the hopes that it will avoid having them be undercut by the competition. And the question here is, how should I coach them to better handle being undercut by competitors? Okay, so competition is very real. This is part of the economy. This is part of our marketplace. This is the free market right here. And so as we think about being undercut, one of the things that we've got to realize is value is not just price. The way in which we calculate value, it has to do with a wide variety of things. It has to do with quality. It has to do with efficiency. It has to do with ego and association. All these things come into play in terms of people making a business decision that go beyond just the price. And so even though you might not be the absolute lowest price, even though you might get undercut, you still have the opportunity to win the day if you manage the entirety of the deal correctly. And so when the competition comes in and they undercut, they're looking to win in one particular category of the deal. And so what that means is that you may not want to win in that category of the deal because to do so would mean to give up all your profitability, which wouldn't make any sense. What that means then is you've got to win in the other categories of the deal. You've got to find a way to connect with the people better. You've got to find the way to deliver more value to whoever it is that's buying. You've got to find a way to play to their ego, to where they want to be associated with you, even though it's going to cost them more to do that. Now, this works in business. Just think about ourselves as consumers. There are so many companies where we pay more to do business with those companies. The question to ask yourself is why? Why do I buy a Lexus instead of a Toyota? Why do I get coffee at Starbucks instead of McDonald's? Why is it that I wear Lululemon clothing instead of Champion clothing? Just pick any sort of category, and there's going to be a higher end brand and a lower end brand. And so why is it that for many of us, we'll want to do business with the higher end brand, or we'll choose to do business with the higher end brand? Well, the higher end brand does some things for us that causes us to look past the price difference, and in our mind equates to more value, even though the cost is more. And so the best way to coach your team on how to deal with being undercut is to help them understand these other elements that are important to your customers in your context, and to give them the resources and the tools and the ideas to where they can win in those other categories of the deal. And in doing so, they can still do very, very well, even though there might be a cheaper, less expensive alternative out there for the customer. All right, well, this has been tremendous fun. I love these questions, and I love this format to where people just ask questions and I get an opportunity to kind of respond and do a little coaching. I want to invite you to submit a question. If you want to email it to me, john@lowrygroup.net. I would love to collect another just batch of questions and spend another episode just answering your questions. It's one of the things that I absolutely love to do. And so I'd encourage you to send me your challenge, send me your problem, send me your question, and I'll be sure to answer it in an episode coming up very soon. These types of episodes are great fun for me. I love the idea that everything I'm speaking to is a question that actually came from a founder or a small business owner. The practicality, the relevance of the insights that I want to offer in response to these questions, I hope will make a difference and help people overcome some of these challenges and be successful. Founders and small business owners, even executives and leaders at larger companies, all of us have to deal with this tension. It's a tension that every negotiator has to deal with, and it's the tension of how much do I cooperate versus how much do I compete? How much do I focus on others and their needs versus how much do I focus on me and my needs? And I think in a lot of these questions, that tension really came to the forefront, to where people are struggling with, I really want to get the deal, but I want to get the deal under good terms. And how is it that I manage that? I really want to hire this person, but I don't know if I can meet the salary expectations. How do I manage that? It goes back to the same tension time and time again. And so overall, the theme is this: we've got to learn how to manage ourselves. And in order to manage ourselves, we've got to know ourselves, and we've got to invest in ourselves and our skills. And if we do this, this tension will become easier. And if this tension becomes easier, you will make better decisions that ultimately will lead to success, both in your business, but also in your life as well. Thanks for listening to Negotiation Made Simple, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.